A rolling, camera B rolling, Kevin rolling, Amara,
Rolling.
and we're ready.
Okay, great. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get my Zoom to record.
Oh, and then you can pass me the phone. It's like
Okay, yeah, let me. Sure. Sorry, I'm the slow one as you're.
Don't worry.
Brain look like
Sorry.
teeth.
I have to speak, but I wanted to record.
Looks freaking right.
Let me do another one.
It just,
Sorry about
like,
that.
It's funny on camera. So I'm just zooming.
Wi-Fi.
And then if that doesn't work, Grace, don't worry because I have my microphone.
Oh, you do? Okay,
yeah,
I'm
and
going to
this
start
has the microphone.
Okay, so it's starting to record. Okay, good. Okay, good. Make sure I don't. The last time I recorded, I muted everything, and I was like, shoot, that was coming.
Oh, wow.
I know. Okay, we're good. Here we go. Okay, good.
It's like having backups on backups.
I know.
Yeah, it is.
There we go. And we're not ready. Let me sit down.
Okay, great.
And we're ready, everyone.
Thank you so much, Roger, for coming to interview with us today. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you for the invitation. Yeah.
Sure. So we kind of want to talk about, like, where did you grow up?
San Francisco. I was born in
Okay.
San Francisco,
Okay.
and we moved around a lot. By the time I went to the 5th grade, I'd been to 6 different schools,
Wow.
so you get accustomed to moving around.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, we settled down at that point, and so I spent the rest of my youth in Pacifica.
Wow.
From then on, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. We're in Pacifica.
Actually, we got into the first units that they built down in Lindemore
Oh, wow.
in Peter Valley. So,
Okay.
we stayed there from 54 on.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. I live in San Pedro Valley, next
do
to San
you?
Pedro Valley
Yeah.
Park on Rosita.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
On,
yeah,
and
yeah.
we're on Rio Vista. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
And then did you stay, and then how did you get to San Francisco State? What was?
I had some friends when I was in high school. And we came out of 6th and 7th grades together, and they went into the university track, right? And so I followed along with them. And when I came out of high school, I found I was eligible to come to state. My sister had come to state for a couple of years. She was a year older than I, and so I came into the school to see what was going on.
Wow. And what high school and what year was that?
This is Westmoor High School.
Oh, yeah.
And I graduated in '61. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Wow. So in 1961, you entered San Francisco State. Or was it about 1960?
61. Yeah.
Wow.
The fall of '61. Yeah.
Wow. So could you tell us kind of what you got involved with here at San Francisco State and?
The first couple of years, I was pretty much really unknowledgeable, not too exposed too much. It's kind of a curious family situation. My father was from El Salvador. My mother was Irish and English. My dad did not speak Spanish in the house, and it wasn't until years later that I realized that he really had trouble with his origins. And so there was kind of that sort of a family dynamic that was happening. At the same time, just as I'm coming out of high school, my parents broke up. And that was a pretty contentious issue for a while. So the first couple of years that I was here, I was pretty much just dealing with that and putting my time in. Yeah.
Wow. What was your major when you were here?
I was thinking about going into elementary education,
Okay.
and the advice I got was incredibly nothing. I mean, I went to see this guy, and the way he talked to me was like, you're not going anywhere, you're not doing anything, so I'm not going to take my time with you, right?
Yeah.
And when I walked out of there, I knew less than what I knew when I went in. So that was the last time I ever went to any kind of advising. So
Wow.
I initially came in for elementary ed, and then I got into majoring in introductory courses.
Okay.
I think I took every introductory course on the campus
Wow.
during the time that I was here.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, so like, what year in school did you start to get involved with different things, and what were the things that you got involved with?
I got involved with the tutorial program.
Okay.
And I wound up working with a young girl, Marilyn, and she was in Chinatown. So at the time, I was working in the small lumber yard down in Pacifica. So I was working Tuesdays and Thursdays, Saturdays and Sundays. So when I come in on, I think my time was like Tuesday and Thursday to spend with Marilyn. And turns out that Marilyn's father was actually a friend of Del Sorensen. And Del was the one who was running the community involvement program along with the tutorial. And we got in. he and I kind of established our relationship during that time. The following year, the tutorial announced that they were going to start working with some high school students out of Jefferson High School in Daly City. And the selection of the students had to do with underachievers. So what wound up happening is that I went in and talked to the crew that was running the tutorial program at the time and told them I had a car and I was interested in working with these high school students. Turns out that the five students were all young women. They were all juniors in high school. They were all grading out way below their supposed abilities. And so what we did was, for that year, I would pick them up in Daly City, take them into the Fillmore, and they would work with elementary school kids for a couple hours, and then I would take them back to their homes. I'd drop them off at their homes on the way back, and we did that for a year, and it began to grow. So we no longer had a stipulation about having somebody be an underachiever or whatever. People who wanted to come out of high school and do this work could do that. And so the group expanded, right? And we involved probably anywhere between 25 to 30 high school students by that point. And Guy Sandler, who was then the coordinator of the tutorial program, came to me and said, well, what about putting together some kind of proposal for a special admissions, right? It turns out that the president of the college has the option to allow a minimal percentage of students in on an exceptional basis. So we wrote together a proposal and got a tremendous amount of support from the dean of students, Ferd Riddell. He set up meetings for us after we had written the proposal that we would attend with various people in his staff to talk about how this would run, right? Unfortunately, we were also involved with one of the professors out of the psychology department who turned out to be less than trustworthy. And I say that because once the proposal was accepted and 25 students were admitted under this particular condition, I walked into the room in which they were having one of their classes and realized that they were in a room with a one-way mirror. And so I shared with them my objection with that, right? As far as the students were concerned, and it was something that they didn't have to tolerate, and anytime that they wanted to, they could get up and leave. At that point, Guy had decided to leave, and I was offered the coordination of the tutorial program, which I accepted, and we went on to continue to grow the program to the point where we had 28 centers, locations, whether in schools or community rooms or even in projects. And we had about 400 plus college students who were mentoring their kids twice a week for the whole time of the semester. And about that time is when you began to hear to get into where we were at that point in what was happening. There was a whole struggle with this McCarthyism and the apartheid in South Africa that was established in the 50s. There was the war in Indochina that became the Vietnam War that was coming forward. There was the emergence of Malcolm X and some of the work that he was doing, as well as the assassinations. The assassination of the president, the assassination of Malcolm, the assassination of Bobby Kennedy, and then the assassination of Martin Luther King, right? And unfortunately at the time, I think this is one of the feelings that we had, is that we didn't identify the murdering of the civil rights workers as assassinations, as part of the political agenda of the discriminatory practices that are just systematically maintained within the whole structure, because it was a real it would have solidified, right, the commonality between all of these concerns as to where the direction was being generated from for these kind of actions to be taken, because they were just so extreme. So when Black consciousness comes onto the campus, right, Jimmy Garrett comes, I believe he came out of SNCC, out of the South, and then out of LA, and then here. And I believe he was working with a couple of faculty people that I would leave it to Jimmy to say who they were, who were instrumental, I think, in terms of assisting in how to go about working on putting together a black, not the Black Studies program, but the presentation of Black Studies to the campus, right? At the same time, within the tutorial program, which was made up mostly of liberal white students, not only in terms of the tutors, but also in terms of the staff, because we had a staff of over 20 people in order to run this program. There was a lot of tension in regards to how this was coming across, and there was a sense of rejection that this group felt by this particular approach. So we went into the spring with this issue coming to the fore. We had a summer program that was going to happen here on campus, where we would bring the kids to the campus and then conduct various programs with them. And it was during this time that it was almost daily, after the kids were taken back to their homes by bus, that we sat down and began to go through these dialogues, arguments, discussions about, what was going to happen with the tutorial program. Because if we were solidified in supporting the Black movement, then it meant that the internal organization and structure and participation of the program had to essentially change. We got to the end of the summer, and the decision was made that that was the direction we were going to take. What happened at that point is that a significant number of the people left. I, at the same time, because the program was being turned over to 3 coordinators, George Murray, Tom Williams, and Bob Weaver. George and Thomas are Black, Bob was white. And it was this 3 were going to be in charge of handling the program. I left the program at that point and became involved with Colonel Persico and Bill, I can't remember, I will remember his name. And the 3 of us sat down and looked at the possibility of putting together something like the Antioch curriculum for a bachelor's, which we did. And we presented it to the Vice President Garrity at the time, and he laughed us out of the room. But however, we were still able to secure the participation of faculty members on the campus. So Sharon Gold, who is now Sharon Martinez, was really a tremendous help to us, right? And at this point, I want to make sure to acknowledge the role that women had in regards to what was going on, because so much of the work that got done was by the women in terms of connections, follow up, really the grunt work of what it took in order to run so much of what we were doing. And so that's where we were, right? We got together with the Experimental College, the Work Study program, a film project run by Oscar, and I can't remember Oscar's last name, who was a Black film director producer, and the Black Student Union. And we put together a proposal to Carnegie. Carnegie came out, invited some of us back to New York for a review of the proposal, and they awarded us a $50,000 grant for that summer. About that time, I began working more intensively in the Mission District.
What year was
specifically-
that, by the way?
This is like, I want to say 65, 66,
okay.
right, somewhere in there. And I was spending less time on the campus, so that by the time we come to the spring of '68, I'm not on the campus. And there are demonstrations that are happening because the students want to make sure that the EOP program continues, as well as the ethnic studies and or Black studies and other studies, are able to be funded. One of the things that's happening during this whole time is that the BSU has continued to move through the campus hierarchy to validate the necessity for Black studies, to the point where not only deans of schools look forward to having that program initiated, but also the academic senate accepts the foundation of a necessity for Black studies, and the president of the college at the time, Summerskill, has moved in that same direction. And right about this time, there's an incident that happens with the Gator, which was then, you know, the newspaper, right? And the Gator had, for at least that particular school year, which would include the fall and semester, about 67, 68, we run a really racist, slanted criticism of the BSU, the whole notion of black, what black means, the identity of black, and ran some really racist political cartoons, right? Of which you can't find any now.
Oh, okay.
I mean, people have looked, right?
They can't
Because
find this
remember
edition of the Gator.
Mariana Mwadi, who was then the head of the Afro-American Student Association, and also Jimmy Garrett, I think, was in one of the cartoons. But as far as history is concerned, you know, that you
can't find that.
it's like it never happened, right? And so I come back to the campus at that time, and when the confrontation occurs between some of the members of the Black Student Union and the Gator staff, there's a fist fight that breaks out in the Gator office, and a typewriter gets thrown out of the window. And at this point, it all becomes incredibly politicized, right? The incident is made to seem as though it's a minor riot that's happened. It's all the Black students' fault, and there's no basis for any other criticism that's been made. And George Murray becomes the focus. George, at that time, had just become the Minister of Education for the Black Panther Party, but he had also been hired to teach, I guess you'd call it 101A English, right, to people who were struggling in terms of learning how to write and whatever. And the chancellor down in Long Beach began to get involved and insisting that something be done about George. But George had been hired by this English instructor, Bob. I can't remember Bob's last name. I'm really sorry about that. So the message goes out: fire George. No, Bob won't do it. And the dean of his department won't do it. The dean of the school won't do it. Summerskill won't do it. We get to November 6th, and I've come back to the campus that fall, and joined the Latin American Student Organization, and we petitioned to become part of the TWLF, which at that time I think was the Chinese, Japanese, Black Student Union, and the Mexican American Student Association, I believe, LASA. So LASA petitioned to be admitted, and was. Our group, I don't think numbered more than 10 people. Not that we were the only Latin Americans that were on the campus, but in terms of being political and so forth. And in our group, we had an Argentinian by the name of Juan Preferria, who had a tremendous amount of perspective and political awareness, as well as a real historian of Latin American-U.S. relations, right? We joined the TWLF in September, October, and we were all waiting to see what was going to happen with the Black Studies. They finally come back and acknowledge, the school finally comes back and acknowledges that there is no money. So in spite of all the acceptances and the approvals and, you know, doing the procedural work in order to have Black Studies recognized, they're just completely thrown out the window. So the BSU calls for the strike on November 6th. The other organizations in the TWLF met for those 2 days, and then on Wednesday came back and said, we not only support the demands, but we have 5 of our own. And key in that was the call for the School of Ethnic Studies. We saw what had happened at other institutions where different programs were put under different departments or different schools, and so you had to struggle in this isolated realm of participation with no support or no backing, right? So a school was essential. And without the school, we were gonna wind up like everybody else, and it's just gonna be the same thing all over again, right? I had been in the University of California and seen some of their material. I walked into this room, which is about the size of this one, and it was wall-to-wall books, all theses that people had written under Black Studies on that campus, right? And it was like, you know, why is this just in this room? You know, I mean, it was incredulous to me, you know, that you had all of this work that had been done, and it was going nowhere, right? It was, and you would agree, and you walk out the door, and that's all you got, right? Yeah. So we joined the strike. At that point, I think one of the things that Malcolm talked about in a speech that he made is you really saw come to the surface in regards to the level of participation that occurred. And what I'm referring to is when he talked about the lack of self-determination. And he was talking to a group of young Black people, but his perspective applied to everybody, because everybody was not experiencing the same level of racism as Black people, but they were experiencing the whole lack of any self-determination that they were able to express in any way, shape, or form. And I think on this campus it became really clear, because by that time we had at least 6 student-run programs that were all directed by students, funded by students, and dealt with, in a couple of instances, student needs, right? The experimental college was one example of it. The faculty evaluation, the first faculty evaluation by students was organized and on the campus, right? It had been in existence for 3 or 4 years. You know, so I think there was a sense of being able to exercise some sense of, you know, your own determination as to where you were going and what you were going to do. That as the weeks of the strike were initiated and went on to about the second week or so, you began to see more and more people participating. And one of the things that made a big difference is that there was a small cadre that came out of the Black Student Union that got into classrooms, started talking to the classrooms. Some of the faculty began to recognize that there may be a need to you know, participate beyond being just verbally supportive, which turned out to be huge in regards to not only our being able to hold on, but also for some of us, just our physical well-being, right? So by this time, because Summerskill, the president, when all this starts, refuses to fire George Murray, which is the focus. I mean, this is the focus in not only the chancellor's office, not only the governor and the mayor, but also the media. I mean, they're all over George, right? George is responsible for everything, right? And so Summerskill refuses to fire George, so they fire Summerskill. They bring in Bob Smith, who came out of the School of Education and had a lot of support among the faculty. And okay, same pressures put on Bob. And I think Bob was the one who requested that we have a convocation. And this is like the second or third week in the strike, right? Because the tensions have gotten beyond excessive on the campus. One of the things that's happened by the end of the first week is that more and more police start winding up on the campus. And at that time, we had a large cafeteria which consisted of a faculty dining room, a large room for just, you know, cafeteria food. There was a small room for the sororities and fraternities called the Redwood Room, and then there was a little bit, you know, nicer, modern coffee shop that was on the back side. The police were coming into the large room and started hassling the various students, to the point at which you know, people are running around and trying to get out of the cafeteria. At one point, the police want to go back into the kitchen, and the people there wouldn't let them. You know, I mean, they're standing there and they say, "You don't belong here, and there's nobody here that you're interested in, you know, so you can leave." Okay. That goes on and it intensifies. You know, there's a couple of incidents where people are pretty badly beaten by the tactical squad.
Wow.
And so Smith steps up and says, "Okay, before this thing continues to get out of hand, you know, so we said, all right, we sat down and went through it, this internal discussion within the TWLF about whether or not we would participate. So some people said, oh, it's capitulation, you don't want to do that, you don't want to be seen as, compromising yourself. The other side said, this is an opportunity to get our voices heard and people, without having to go individually into classrooms and stuff. So we had the convocation. Convocation goes on for 2 days. And there's a few people from the administration, there's a few people from the Black Student Union, TWLF, that are each relaying back and forth their particular positions. It's becoming clearer and clearer that the issue isn't on the campus, the issue is with Long Beach. And the issue is with the governor's office, right? And so it's like there was an agreement that we put forth in terms of participating in the convocation. We said we would be part of the convocation as long as there were no disciplinary actions taken against anybody who had participated in the strike up to that point. On the second day, I'm coming back into the convocation and somebody stops me and says, we need you to look at these 2 notices, right? I look at them and they're disciplinary actions against 2 people who had been arrested or charged with something, right? So went up to the podium and said, the convocation's over. We walked out of that room and 90% of the people that were in the auditorium got on the picket line. And then it swelled. It just swelled from there, right? The faculty that was supporting us got together and applied to be recognized as a union. We were coming down, I think it was sometime in December, and the tactical squad, which at that time was like the SWAT team now, right? And they were specifically there they had been trained by dealing with anti-war demonstrations, right? So they had gotten a lot of practice into being able to agitate and get people to react to them. And so where we were at is that we were up coming out of the quad alongside of what is the student center now, and the tactical squad was coming up outside of this building, the psychology building, up the path to confront one another. And we were probably maybe 20 yards away from each other, and the faculty come walking through with their strike signs. They had just gotten recognized by the AFL-CIO as a legitimate union, and so what happened is that froze the police, right? They weren't about to start taking on the union, especially with the relationship that the city has had with the police and unions.
What day was that, by the way?
Historically.
Do you have the date for that?
I
Or
really
a month,
can't.
maybe?
Yeah.
What month
I
was
want
that?
to say December.
Okay,
It was
December, okay.
because it was, at that point, things had gotten really intense, right? Really, really intense. There were confrontations that happened. People were attacked. One guy lost his spleen simply walking out of the library. There was a time when we used to have these huts, right?
Yeah.
These little haunted huts, and that's where all the programs were at. And there was one long hut, and there was a series of 3 huts that were perpendicular to it with a corridor that went in between. I came walking out of the hut, and this one cop had gotten separated from his platoon or whatever, right? And he's walking backwards as I look down this corridor. He's got his gun out, and he's scared, and he's waving the gun around, and I just, it was like, okay, well, just get everybody back, let this guy get to where the hell he's going, and just get him out of here, right? And it was that kind of intensity, And so we go into December. We have the support of the union, which means that we now can pick it out on the street, right, and not get hassled and whatever, right? We do every once in a while march, in the quad, as a demonstration of solidarity, and the commitment of the people. I mean, this is to be acknowledged over and over and over again. The commitment of the people who participated. I mean, and on any and every level, right, was just total. I mean, people came back the day after they'd been beaten up, knocked down, bandages around their head, Hayakawa gets named as the president after Bob Smith is fired.
And Smith was fired as well? Bob
Yeah,
Smith
but-
was fired as well?
Yes, he was.
Because he wasn't compliant.
He wasn't compliant.
Mhm.
He wasn't compliant. Some of what I'm relating comes out later on, right?
Mhm.
But I would include it here because this is the time period in which it happened, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Well, what was going on is that Reagan wanted to come in with the National Guard as he had done over in the University of California.
Mhm.
Alioto, who was then the mayor, right,
Mhm.
had aspirations to become governor.
Mm.
And so the last thing that was going to happen is that was him to let a Republican governor bring the armed guard onto a campus within his city.
Mm.
You know, so there was that standoff, right,
Mhm.
which in some instance or some perspective you could say will work to our advantage, right, or at
Yeah.
least assisted us in that
Wow.
sense, right.
I had no idea that the National Guard was gonna be called.
Mhm.
That's, wow.
That was his push. That was Reagan's solution, right?
Wow.
And you know, they were gonna drop gas out of the helicopters like they did in Berkeley.
Oh my God.
And all the rest of
Yeah,
that, right?
yeah.
And they would. So the other thing is, it was other municipalities from as far away as out of state were bringing in their police force to get trained in dealing with so-called mob control, right?
Wow.
And the curiosity, but beyond curiosity, the reality of this was the way in which we were depicted, right?
Mm.
We're the radicals, we are the communists, we're the socialists, we're all the evil in the world,
Mhm.
you know, and we don't, a lot of us are white, a lot of us aren't, right? People from the community come out, Ron Dellums and I think Willie Brown, Cecil Williams,
Mhm.
a couple other ministers, Carlton Goodland, who's the manager or the publisher of the Black Paper. They come out to the campus and they speak, and it really does represent a relationship between the campus and the communities
Mhm.
that up until then were just essentially non-existent,
Mhm.
right? So we go like this with Hayakawa now being the president, and he says, okay, we're gonna cut the semester, we're gonna increase Christmas vacation by a week. So we're gonna be out of school a week earlier, right? So instead of 2 weeks off, we have 3 weeks off, right? So the question is, what's gonna happen, right?
Mhm.
People head off and deal with Christmas and then New Year's and whatever, we come back to campus and we're back on it again. The teachers are still on strike, we're still on strike, and we go on from there. It's sometime in this period where we hold a rally, and we were at the speaker's platform, which was between the cafeteria and the gym,
Mhm.
and it was put there after the free speech movement in Berkeley, because the campus at that time didn't want to get involved in any conflict regarding it. So they put a platform up so anybody can say whatever they want to,
Mhm.
because this is free speech, right? So we had a rally there. And it was at that time that the major bust happened. And 400 plus people got arrested in one sweep by the police when
Oh,
they all
yeah.
surround everybody. And
That was January.
okay.
Yeah.
And we're
Yeah.
caught it on, right? We continue through this way. The union, the teachers' union, gets a contract, and so we lose that part of the support. However, we're able to continue on into March, and it's like the dog days of winter.
Yeah.
You know, the support is there, but the numbers are dwindling.
And it was
it's-
winter too, right? You all are
Exactly.
on the picket line. I've heard like from 7 a.m. to like 10 p.m. every day in front of 19th Avenue.
Yeah, we were. I don't know if we were there that late.
Okay, I had heard.
Yeah, it was 5 days a week the whole time.
Yeah.
You know, anytime at school was in, and unfortunately confrontations happened earlier. You know, with some of I don't know what the source of it was, but some of the athletes went after or tried to oppose the picket lines, and there was that confrontation.
Oh, wow.
There was another time when a number of us were surrounded by the highway patrol. We were caught between two buildings on one pathway.
Wow.
But fortunately, we were close enough to 19th Avenue that the people who were picketing there came down, and that segment of the police squadron got surrounded. And so the decision was, you know, let the other end come up and beat the hell out of whoever they want, but who knew what was gonna happen to these guys in the middle?
Mhm.
And, you know, the wise decision was made, and they separated.
Mm.
And we were able to move out and go out onto the street again, right?
Mhm.
I would come onto the campus after that with 2 or 3 people just to see what was going on. And by that point, you know, the police up on the roofs were hollering, you know, let's get this done, let's get this going, we wanna go home, right?
Mm.
So that's 4 months into it.
Mhm.
And the Black Student Union comes to TWLF and says that Frank Brand has been approached by, I believe it must have been the Chancellor's office, I'm not sure of this, but somebody from there, about making arrangements to settle. And the discussion goes down. We agreed to do this. I believe there was 6 faculty people. If my understanding is correct, and somebody would have to check this to verify it. Hayakawa was taken off the campus, either by some official responsibility or whatever. He had to go do something somewhere or whatever. And so we met with with faculty from San Francisco State representing the Chancellor's office, and 6 of us from the Black Student Union and TWLF.
Mhm.
And we met at Frank's house for 3 nights in a row.
Mm.
And on the 3rd night, thought we had gotten to a point of resolution. And so we returned back to our groups, came back with the decision that this is the way we would go. And we were able to terminate the strike on the 15th of March, I think.
Mm.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Do we wanna take Mark, do you wanna kind of ask your questions, and then do we need a little break? Do we need to give you a break?
For what?
Like
For
what?
food.
Do you want
Just
some
a
water?
little bit of water for
Yeah,
me.
get
Okay.
some water, okay.
Yeah.
How much time are we in?
So 37 minutes.
Okay. This is amazing. There's so many pieces, and I know there's so many questions that we'll probably wanna do some
Sure.
follow-up on. But,
Thank you so much.
I know,
I'm
thank you.
like
This is like, I know, I'm just like.
transfixed.
Me too. I'm so transfixed, and I'm just thinking, you were kind of a leader, and you were, you're talking about the movement. But Mark, do you want to ask your questions, and I'll follow up with mine?
Are we still filming?
Yes.
We're still filming,
Oh.
yes.
I just said, I'm blown away, thank you so much. I had a question about the money, the funding earlier on, before, I have questions all the way through, but I'm just wondering about the funding, that the tutorial program and the, what's it called, the involvement?
Community involvement.
The community involvement, all of those things were under ASA, right?
Mhm.
So, when they told the BSU, when everything was moving forward, and they said they had no money, they just suddenly just dropped everything. They said, we have no money, but how did that land with you all? I mean, how did that, it was like, cause everything was building up so positively, and then all of a sudden it's like, we don't have any money, and then there was the incident with, how do you think it all?
Well, the funds were handled, if I'm not mistaken, through, there was an administrator, and I can't remember, I think his name was Harry. And he was more like an informer for the administration, right? And I believe it's like the San Francisco Foundation or something like that, some structure like that was the one that dispensed the money. Control of the money was supposedly in the hands of the Associated Students
Right.
and the executive group, right? And they were the ones who in 60 or 61 got together and decided that these programs would be instituted and they would be funded with student monies, so that the Black Studies work that was done prior to the strike, some of it was presented through the experimental college, right?
Right.
And so that validated the studies, right? But once the administration made the decision that we were no longer going to be financed, we're no longer able to finance ourselves by freezing the money, which is what they could do. You had no recourse,
Wow.
right? So there was no money, right? I'm really glad you brought that point up, because regarding funds, and getting people out of jail.
Mm.
The support that we got was really incredible. I mean, people were not only donating money, they were donating their property.
Wow.
You know, and in some instances, people donated their property twice.
Wow.
You know, and again, going back to the defense committee, which was put up to handle the whole thing of getting people out of jail, was essentially run by women, right? I mean, and it started out with Tomasita and Sharon Martinez, and then went on to I can't remember Julia's last name, but there were like 3 or 4 women that were involved in it, along with Roy Harrison, that really made it possible for us to maintain a picket line, right, and to maintain a presence on the campus during the whole struggle. Yeah.
Did do you feel like the tutorial program and all that work that you were doing, that sort of one-on-one with students, and it kind of grew, and taking them home and interacting with them and really helping them, do you think that played a role in terms of also, you know, from its very beginnings, building up these relationships, these really grassroots, you know, interpersonal relationships, interacting not only with the students but their families, and then their families knew their other families, that it grew to lead this sort of base of growth, because I'm understanding that the tutorial program really grew a lot while you were working with it. It grew exponentially, really quickly. I'm just wondering how you feel about those components, the grassroots components of it.
You know, I agree with you in the sense that I think that the exchange had an impact. I would hesitate to try to determine to what extent, because it's one of those things that once you have a relationship, right, with a youngster, and once that relationship is broken, you know, that going back and trying to regenerate it, you know, is especially in these instances would be extremely difficult, right? Because there's a loss of confidence, a loss of faith,
Right.
a loss of trust,
Right.
and you know, even though it is a benefit to everybody, it's not realized at the time, right? And so I think you know, we used to stand outside of the gym as students were coming in after registration to begin, and just, you know, hand out flyers and leaflets to talk to people about, you know, the possibility of doing that. And I think there might have been something in that you know, carried over into people realizing the bigger world. You know, many of them I don't think had ever been in a poor community or had any sense of whatever poverty there was in the area, which was remarkable for San Francisco, right? To have the reputation that it has as a liberal town, liberal city, and for it to have so ingrained with the racism and the poverty, right? The level of poverty that the city, you know, has endured and endures, right? Yeah.
Can you talk about your? Is that okay?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
please.
Yeah. About because you're a leader, you know, during the strike, and can you talk about, you know, because you were talking about you joined LASA and all, but really throughout this you become a leader throughout this, and could you talk about that, how that happened for you, and you know, and what that was like?
It was so LASA joins the TWLF, and we go into a meeting with the TWLF, and you know, certain positions are filled, right? The chair is Al Wong. I believe Crutchfield is a treasurer. Tomasita becomes a secretary. Ron Kitache was a spokesperson, and I was a spokesperson as well, right? There is some angst among part of the TWLF group as to my participation, and that was because I had spent a lot of time on the campus working in various programs and established relationships with faculty, you know, administrators, deans. I had worked for the associate deans of undergraduate studies for putting together the work study program. In fact, he hired me for a year, right, to do this work, and so that's where the angst came from. There was a lack of trust, there was that veneer that was in this, right? So when we got going into the strike, there was a challenge made as to my having this position, right? and you know, we were able to hold our own, and we retained the position, and we went into the strike. And what was remarkable about that experience was the commitment and the consistency. I mean, there were only a couple of instances when a particular motion was made that, you know, would have negated what we were doing, right? Or trying to continue, you know,
Right.
to achieve. But the overwhelming response was, you know, that we were in this for the long run. We all knew what we were struggling to overcome and to address, and that held the day. That held the day continuously, right? Yeah. And what's you know, it's hard to explain. I think of myself basically as an introvert. You know, so it's like, okay.
But you were there.
Here we
But
go.
you were
You were
there.
there all the time, right?
Yeah.
Through many years,
Yeah.
you were always there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're kind of pushed to be the spokesperson in a way, right? We see you on camera, you know, you're there in the KTVU next to Penny. We're like, oh, there, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Well, you know what? In for a penny, in for a pound.
Were you were you an older student? Like, how old were you
Yeah.
when the strike happened?
Yeah.
What was your
Okay.
age?
Okay, so I was like 23.
You were 23. Wow.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah, and actually the leadership of most of the programs, or most of the TWLF BSU was older.
Right. The older.
Right, you know, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah.
People were vets and they came back to school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. There was, yeah. I think that made a difference.
Yeah.
It really did, as well as the relationship with some of the faculty and the administrators. You know, in the long run, you know, and that's another part of the story that you need to have Dan Gonzalez tell. Right?
Okay.
Because you flash forward, we go through the strike, we settle the strike,
Right.
and so then the chancellor's office comes back and says, okay, you have until this date in August to organize your curriculum and whatever, make sure that it's, you know, going to comply and whatever, and you're good to go, right? Well, the only ones who had a curriculum together of any sort was the Black Student Union. So this means the other groups, you know, are, and it's like, what is his name? The Japanese instructor who became the dean.
Jim Harabashi.
Yeah, Hirabashi.
Yeah.
He was working with the students on that.
Right. Right.
And some other ones were, I'm sure Dr. Juan Martinez was involved in that.
Yeah.
But again, go back to people's capacities and what they're really capable of.
Yeah.
Grad students, right? Grad students are the ones who really essentially
But the
not only do
curriculum
the
is
grunt
right there.
work, but, you know, put the whole thing together.
Mm-hmm.
And then, okay, the duplicity of the system. I mean, this is where it comes to fore. There's a specific date when all this stuff is supposed to be provided, right? As stipulated by the chancellors. They come back a couple of weeks before that date and say the date has been moved up a week. You know, so
Wow.
here, if you're not only putting this together, you're taking care of yourself, you're doing jobs, you're doing this and that, whatever, you know, and in the middle of finally getting to the point or the pinnacle of where you're at, they come and cut your legs off, right? You know, so it's like that. Having confidence in the system is a challenge, you know, to say the least.
That hasn't changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you feel like is the lasting impact of the strike on you?
You know, there's all kinds of things that I realized, and one of them was that I know a lot less than I think I do, and the necessity to be critical, to ask questions, and the importance of appreciating the reality of things. You know, to not take your notions as you know, verbatim, and to be willing to appreciate not only where you're strong, but also, you know, where you're weak, where you know you don't have enough to really decide. And then the other thing was understanding the extent to which very few people have such a tremendous amount of influence and outreach. You know, to see the way in which the media it can be orchestrated. You know, and I think, well, not only the experience of the pandemic, but I also of Donald Trump reminds me a lot of that period.
Yeah. Yes.
And the angst that it generates and the abuse. You know, the license to act on the basis of your prejudice and it's supposed dominance, right? You know, it's yeah. I mean, all of those things come together in appreciating this experience, right? Yeah.
Just one thing, may I?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
There's one thing you mentioned earlier on, and I've heard this also from Dr. Garrett as well, about, you said it earlier, and but I think it's really important, talked about consciousness raising, that there was also underlying passion and drive to raise consciousness. And that's kind of what I meant when I was talking about, you know, engaging with the students, the tutorial program, like personally engaging, because people learn to trust and also to learn to listen when somebody's there for them. And I'm just wondering if you could just reflect on that. Do you feel that that was successful? How that drive to raise consciousness, to raise a consciousness about how we're educated or how we can be educated, what we need in our education, what we want to really transform it. How do you think that developed? How did you witness it? And do you think it still exists?
In consciousness has a lot to do with what you're exposed to, right? And the exposure has, you know, the exposure comes from something you can't get away from. So you're into the reality of whatever that is, right? And that reality is undeniable. You can make an attempt to deny it, but in making that attempt, you're going to compromise yourself to a point that even you won't be able to tolerate. And so it's a progression of realization, but also in terms of participation. You know, the participation really does enable you to become more honest with yourself and to understand others in regards to their orientation. For myself, listening to the logic, the argument, the position of Black consciousness, I go back to an image I saw of one of the civil rights demonstrations in the South, and it really struck me. This black man is carrying a sign. The sign says, "I am a man." And I'm thinking to myself, why would you need to carry that sign? You know? And you go from there. You go from there and you learn a lot about the world, right? The other thing for myself is that I realized in my own heritage and what that was about, you know, and the need to appreciate it in terms of having an identity, right? Realizing that we're not coming out of vacuums. And that an awful lot has happened in order for us to be where we are, and that the only way it's going anywhere is if we jump in and participate in it, right? So, and it's about choosing your spots. You know, not everybody's going to do the same thing. You don't need everybody to do the same thing. You really need people to jump in and participate, contribute. Yeah, people like to say in arguments, well, I'm going to play the devil's advocate. Well, you don't need to play the devil. There's enough devils out there. You know, so, yeah, if you're doing something, you're going to uncover all the devils you'll ever want to deal with, right? And so that's where you go, right? Yeah. And that's what spoke to me about Black consciousness, right? The struggle that my father had to deal with, you know, his entire life, right? And this comes from, okay, his mom, my grandmother, was a native of Central America. She was 100% Central American Indian, right? She was barely 5 feet tall. And I don't think ever weighed 105 pounds. but she had an iron will, like, yeah. And, you know, he's, to realize what my dad had struggled with a background like that, right? That was kind of shattering, right? Yeah. To appreciate it, to appreciate the extent to which racism can carry through, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And still, you know, still people say, you really think there's racism out there? And I don't tell them my story, right? Because sometimes people think you personalize something, and it's like you can't get over it, right?
Yeah.
And that's not what I'm.
In terms of racial consciousness, what age do you feel like you've started to develop that? Like you said, you saw your father facing things and your grandmother facing things.
You know, believe it or not, it wasn't until maybe 10, 12 years ago, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because it became evident to me, finally, when my dad tells me the story about, you know, there's actually 2 Native tribes in the valley that his mom came from. And one of them was Indian, and the other one was white. You know, and this from a man who was maybe 86 at the time, right? Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
I had a student ask me that very question. I think he was just asking because he wanted me to talk to the class about it. He actually said, you know, so do you think that there's, you know, structural racism, institutional racism? He's from Egypt.
Okay.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
you're in this class, right?
Yeah.
But it just was really funny that he asked it. I wasn't quite sure why he asked it, but so it ended up introducing a whole lecture that completely digressed from what I was doing, but
Right.
it really, you know, but at least he asked, you know.
Yeah.
I think, you know.
Go ahead, Sydney. Go ahead, Sydney.
I had like 2 quick questions.
By the way, Sydney, you should introduce yourself.
Oh, so I'm Sydney Jackson. I'm a senior, a history major, and Africana Studies minor, working on this project. And my first question is tied to what you were talking about, your identity, your racial identity. You're talking about consciousness that was contributed by like the Black consciousness. How did that affect your, like you figuring out all of those things? How did that affect your father at that age? Did that have any effect on him?
No, it really didn't. He never addressed it. In fact, he was in El Salvador at the time. He had gone back, you know, and during the strike, it was he wasn't around. He didn't return until a year or so afterwards. And he came back talking about the U.S. had to get out of El Salvador, and that was kind of where he was at. He never got into his racial identity or in that regard. And obviously, for me, he had to have struggled with it his whole life, or if not that, when he got here. Because when he was a youngster in El Salvador, right? He had gotten to the point where he had like 2 or 3 taxis, right? And this is when he was 16, 17 years old. And something had happened, and he had to leave. So he winds up coming to San Francisco, and he's probably 18, 19 years old at the time, right? And so his exposure is from that point on, right? And that effective, right?
My other question was tied to your timeline. So you said you started at San Francisco State in 1961, and then when did you graduate, or did you graduate? You didn't graduate. You just kept working with the.
Okay. Yeah. I got readmitted to the school 3 times.
How many units are you off for graduation?
I believe I have 140 units, but none of them are probably compiled to
Any
a
one
degree.
major?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I took every introductory course offered, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
With lot.
Give you like an honorary.
Hello.
Well, yeah. We want to look into that, Roger. We're going to look into that because we really want you to We want to get your degree.
Actually, I think you're gonna find out I got most of my credits after the strike.
Okay.
Even so.
Yeah. Now, did you do any jail time?
You know, the time I did was like, was it 21 days or something, like maybe a month.
Okay.
I was part of I was, unfortunately, 8 other people were put on trial with me, right, for the mass bust, and we were convicted. Unfortunately, I think they were convicted along with me, right, because, then the judge says Alvarado is gonna go in the holding cell until my ruling, right? And he had been the judge for the auto row arrests, right? When the demonstrations were held on Van Ness Avenue to hire black people
Right.
in the auto sales industry. And one of the defendants that was convicted took off on it. So he thought I was a flight risk. So he sent me into the holdings. They said, okay, we're gonna hold you in city jail, right? I got there. The next morning they shipped me down to county.
To San Bruno.
Yeah, and my lawyer finds out about it. So the day after that, I come back to city, right? Because you're not supposed to be in county until they decide what they're going to do with you. Anyway, that's what it was. Yeah.
And then you were, what, 21 days? And
21 days. Yeah.
Yeah. And who were the other 8 that were kind of?
Oh,
Yeah.
Participants.
Okay.
Supporters of the strike.
Okay.
But nobody in terms of any of the organizations that were, I mean, not even SDS or
Okay.
PLP or any of the Socialist Workers Party or whatever,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how were those 21 days?
It was amazing. It was really, really amazing. I wound up in there with Jesse James. He was Reverend Jesse James, right? He had set up a teenage group called the Mission Rebels that was pretty active in the mission area for about 5 to 10 years, right? And I don't know what he was doing in jail, but he was with this holding cell consisted of a large center room and 4 individual cells that held 8 person per unit, right? So you had 32 people who were, could be in this space. And it was, I mean, every day was, something was happening, right? On one instance, a young guy came in and tried to commit suicide by putting his head in a toilet. I mean, this friend of mine, I'm standing in the large room, and I hear this voice holler, "Hey Roger," and I turn around and one of the psych professors, right, Gene, I can't remember Gene's last name, said, "What are you doing here?
Oh.
What are you doing here?"
Oh, okay.
He said, "Well, I didn't pay my parking tickets." And he didn't have enough money when they busted him. So
Really? The parking ticket?
they brought him in for who knows, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is, I'm in there, and there's a tall white guy who gets caught. This is nighttime. It's like 10 o'clock, something like that. And they call his name out, and he comes out, and they tell him that his wife's dead.
Oh.
Right. So he and I had talked earlier, and he asked the guys, to let me out so we could just spend some time together. And it turns out he was married to an Indian woman, right? And they were dealing drugs. And he was talking about some of his experiences with the police, right? And how in one instance they had all this money and drugs, out on the table, and they got busted. He said when he winds up in court with the charges, there's no money. And there's just a couple of bags of whatever it is that they had, right? So he's really uncomfortable with what's happened, right? And not only in terms of his wife, but it's just like there's no way of knowing, where to go and how any of this is going to work out. So we spent that night talking, right? And just going through his experiences and some of what he had gone through. Some reason or another, some guys would be able to get into the cell with drugs, right? And that went down. But there was, there were 3 or 4 young guys in there who were pimps,
Mm.
You know, they got picked up for that, and there was one older black man there, and he had a way of saying everything he had to say in terms of trains.
Mm.
You know, trains traveling on, coming into the depot, whatever. And there was one kid in there that was giving him a hard time one time, and he turned around and his response was like way over the kid's head, but he just
Yeah.
nailed him, right? You know, and it was just, you know, was that
Yeah.
he was that familiar with relating to reality
Yeah.
through this particular way of talking,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Do you need to slip out? Or could
I need
Okay, Mark's got to slip out, but we want to continue with our questions, so we'll let him. We have to be downtown.
Mhm.
I did want to mention that, so is this gonna go to 2:30 or like what time is it?
We
gonna
were
go?
we would go to like 3.
Okay, 3 o'clock.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Are
but
we, are we gonna do a
you believe it,
follow-up?
2:30.
A
I think we might need a
follow-up?
follow-up, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Would you mind? Do you have time for a follow-up?
Sure.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Thank you so much,
so much.
Professor Mark Davis.
Thank you, Mark.
Good to see you again.
So great to see you.
Yes,
Yes.
indeed.
Thank
Thank
guys.
you.
Yeah,
Take
sure.
care.
Yeah, travel
Bye.
safely, Mark.
Thank you so much.
Travel safely.
I'm actually I'm going to leave as well.
Oh, no
Thank
worries.
you so much, but Roger, I do wanna know,
Okay, let's
how are
cut.
you feeling? Are you okay?
We ran
No,
out of
I'm
battery.
I just paused
You
it
saved
for them
it. Okay,
leaving,
okay.
and then cameras rolling. We're good to go.
What would you say? What does solidarity look like to you? I mean, just what does solidarity mean to you, and how do you get there?
You can't say that it's just circumstance. There has to be some intent and a rationale.
Yeah. Oh.
I'll open the door.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry for calling.
No, you're
Yep.
so good.
Good, brother.
Yeah, no problem. Don't worry.
Yeah.
I only have one.
Yeah, no worries. Travel safely, Mark.
Thanks very much. Mhm.
Sure.
Sit down, and then we'll be good to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we're good.
Yeah.
So, and by intent, I would more accurately say some analysis,
Yeah.
some review of what's going on and what it is that you're looking at, that appreciates and identifies the causes and effects of what you're looking at, and doing it repeatedly and with various resources, whether it's individuals or research or information, garnering of information, and purpose, right? And purpose, and also being willing to reevaluate and do it again. As a continual part of realizing that it's actually a way of life that enables you to maintain what to me what solidarity is, right?
Yeah.
I mean because it takes more than an effort,
Yeah.
and it's going to take part of you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's going to take part of you with it, and you're going to travel down whatever road that leads you to.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I had one more question, and then we'll open it up to everyone. I wanted to know what was the strikes like your mother? What did your mother think of your involvement in all this?
My mom gets invited during the strike. My mom gets invited by a 7th grade teacher I had in Pacifica, and I guess they go to dinner or something like that, and he's kind of talking to her about what I'm doing, and it's more or less inappropriate, and he takes her out to his car when they're leaving, and he opens the trunk and he points to a bat and says goodbye. So she never criticized or was negative in regards to what I was doing, and I mean I think part of that was her whole experience being married to my dad and what he had to deal with, and where he was at. Yeah, so she pretty well understood it. I actually have a couple of stepsisters
Oh, okay.
who are graduates of of San Francisco State
Oh, wow.
who maintained that I ruined the school.
Oh, what? Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
and it's, you know, and it's the kind of thing, yeah, where it's where people fall,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
and whether it's by choice or by lack of experience,
Yeah.
or their experience,
Exactly.
you know,
Exactly.
and it's, yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Mhm.
So the seventh grade teacher had a bat in his trunk,
Mhm.
wanting to.
Consequences, implied consequences,
Oh.
a visual consequence.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. About your involvement, kind of.
Mhm.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's deep.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's deep.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You all want to ask questions? Okay.
Yeah, you said you were working in the mission, and I know some of like the BSU students who were like doing outreach in the Fillmore and
Mhm.
like in the other black areas, like their parents and like the community came out from those areas. Did those people from the community and the mission like also come out and support during the strike?
You know, we had, I'd been connected to the Golden Diablos, right? And there was small group of guys who were down around 16th and Cap,
Mm-hmm.
and
I worked right by there.
did you know?
I worked on 16th from Valencia.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of them, Johnny Rodriguez, came out to the campus a couple times, right? The sad reality was that I had gone down into the Mission District to talk to various people through Roberto Vargas, right? And he was a Nicaraguan poet that was in the Mission District, and he set up this meeting, and there were maybe 5 or 6 people in the room, right? And they were each, you know, connected to various programs. This was during the anti-poverty, and they were so non-committal. Roberto jumps up at one point and hollers out, "What the fuck's the matter with you guys?" Right? So that's what I realized that down the road is, like, you know, this was their livelihood, you know, this is how they were getting by, and for them to, you know, appear to be supportive was not going to be to their benefit, right? I'd gone to a meeting in the Good Samaritan where we were talking about what we were doing here, and, you know, part of, at least a portion of the people that were there were upset that we were doing anything because we were disturbing things. You know, everybody was getting accustomed to being as they were, and what we were doing was intrusive. And yeah.
I have 2 questions. My first question is, so like my understanding of being a part of these movements and being a leader and organizer is that these roles aren't something that people aspire to be. It just so happens that the situation needs people to step up and speak up and to help figure out the details of what needs to be done. Like, is there anything you can add to what it means to step up during, especially these times, and to make change within a community? Like, it's so scary sometimes, but how did you step into your roles back then?
Good question.
I don't think I realized what it was going to take in order to do it. I had become familiar enough with what I had done and the people that I had been around, right? I spent some time in various people's homes, and really had the opportunity to realize the struggle that so many people have, right? That an opportunity to address some aspect of that, you know, was not something that I was gonna, you know, ignore, right? And I think that's part of the process, right? Some people come from political families, or they're politicized, right? And they seem to have a sense of, you know, what it takes to move along and whatever, which really does contribute to the analysis and exposure, right? Because you get some direction, and you're not just wandering around, right? Talking about Juan Preferria, the Argentinian, you know, you talking to him for a half an hour or whatever, and you learn so much in regards to what's happened in the world, and then translate it to here, and see the way in which it's put together, right? You know, this whole process of colonizing, you know, of going into places and reducing people's existence to certain areas, right? is just such a consistent practice that sustains the racism, right? You know, the lack of objectivity, you know, the use of any and all rationales to sustain. You know, what's really interesting, right, is in talking to somebody that you are trying to get to tell you what's going on, the denial, right? The denial is like the first line of defense, right? You know, if you just deny whatever, your knowledge, your participation, awareness, or whatever, you know, it's like people jump on that right off the top. And the other one is assurances. If you're given assurances with no names and no other resource in terms of recourse, you know, then that's all you need to know. That this is not working in your behalf, but you are learning. You are learning where people fall, right? Some people will go along to a certain point, and then that's it. And that's why it's important to understand people's capacities, and that they're not all the same, you know.
Wow.
The other thing is to encourage younger people and to appreciate what younger people have done historically is critical. It's really, really critical to appreciate the questions and the challenges for answers. You know, and if you need evidence, right? I mean, you go back to World War II, right? And they had 19 and 20-year-olds flying planes, right? Women were flying planes from the United States to England during that time, right? You know, if there's any hesitation in regards to having confidence in your ability to figure things out, you know, don't be afraid to question. At the same time, don't be afraid to accept it, right?
Wow, that was a great answer. Thank you so much. And from what I understand, this leads into the second question, is like the care you have for others motivates the work that one does. And so my second and final question is like, what did joy look like during the protest? Like what kept you going beyond the goal of wanting to learn about your history and defend what is happening against your peers and instructors?
Just the continual commitment of people. Yeah, the fact that some folks kept coming back and back and back. You know, realizing that people were putting their livelihoods on the line. That kind of thing. It wasn't until later that I realized, in talking with one young woman from Canada, that her dad had been an associate professor in the creative arts department, and he had to go to Canada to find a job.
Wow.
Right. You know, and he wasn't the only one. You know, he wasn't the only one. It was just, and then the way the whole thing kept carrying on after the strike, right? You know, Kayakawa getting rid of all the black faculty, you know, moving people on. You know, that the retribution was just endless. I would encourage you to do another segment of this after the strike, right?
Yeah.
You know, because I don't know how well documented that is.
Yeah.
But I think the existence of the school has to be recognized, needs to be recognized for what that group of people did at the time, right?
Who do you feel like we should interview for those, in terms of after the strike, that work after the strike?
You know, Dan Gonzalez, I think, is a really a strong place to start. Lorraine Chu, because of her experience here.
Right.
Also, Penny Nakatsu.
Yeah.
Right. I'd also go to.
We've been trying to reach Ron Kittichai, but he doesn't answer my email.
Yeah, yeah, no. Carmen?
Carmen, oh yeah, we're interviewing her next week with
Carmen
Wendy.
Carrillo? Okay,
Yeah.
good.
So excited.
Yeah, also Donna James.
Donna James.
Donna, we've been trying. Donna Amator doesn't
Yeah.
respond to my emails.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I worry when people don't respond to my email. I hope everything's okay. I don't know.
Let me just send her something, see,
Yeah,
see if she
please.
would,
We
okay?
really want to interview Donna.
She's a gem.
Mm.
She is
Yeah.
really, she has a way of talking to anybody. I mean, just anybody.
Yeah.
And, you know, she becomes their friend.
Mm.
Yeah, we really want to interview
Yeah.
Donna. We've,
Yeah.
I think, called and emailed.
Okay.
So yeah, it'd be great. I mean,
Okay.
you know, and we'd reached out to Margaret, but never
Mm.
responded. You know, and then she passes 2 months
know,
later.
I
So
know.
we were just so sad.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to get to people. You know, that's why we're trying to every week just
Sure.
we're interviewing someone.
Sure, you bet.
But
Yeah.
when we did interview Daniel Phil Gonzalez, he talked about,
Yeah,
well, first
okay.
of all, he was talking about like the sex, drugs, and rock and
Okay.
roll at the
Right,
time,
right,
which was
right.
like so
Oh.
funny.
Okay.
And he was just left and right exposing strikers like, she smoked weed, he smoked weed. But then he also, he really talked about like the building of the curriculum and really how much pressure was on their shoulders,
Right.
and like going into the communities and getting those articles and papers and insight and history. Like I took so much away from him talking about
You bet.
that community work in
Sure.
the aftermath of the strike.
Yeah.
And Penny mentioned that too,
Yeah,
of like
yeah,
the gathering
yeah.
of the curriculum
Yeah.
of what the students are going to read and learn.
Yeah.
But at the same time, too, that we've learned from Dan and from others is that young people are young people,
Uh-huh.
and sometimes they're at the strike because they want to go ask someone out.
Right, okay. Yeah.
Or they meet someone, you know, in class, and then they go to the strike together, or you know, they're.
Okay.
So we're hearing different stories like that, you know,
Right.
which is interesting too, because young people are young people, and
Exactly.
you know.
We can't say names, but at least
Yeah.
2 strikers were like, I had a crush on Roger Alvarado. Yeah.
We won't mention names.
We'll
yeah.
cut that out of the interviews.
They wouldn't let us. Like,
yeah,
they're like,
we had to
no.
turn the cameras off,
Right,
and they're like,
right.
I had a crush on him.
That you brought them to the strike, I
Oh,
guess.
is that right?
They were willing to come to the picket line.
Yeah.
But it's funny because we hear stories like that throughout, and Ernie was so funny. Ernie Brill.
Yeah,
I had no idea Ernie was dating Lisa.
I didn't know either.
They were dating. Did you know that during the strike?
Yeah.
You
I
know,
didn't know.
you know, and just different. We just different things like that. We didn't know it comes up in interviews.
Yeah.
They're not recorded though. We're like, we didn't know you were
No,
dating.
yeah.
Obviously, Malcolm and Irene we interviewed, and of course they're a married couple, but they met in class, I guess.
Oh, did they? Okay.
Yeah, and then they were
Okay.
going to the picket line together, you
Right,
know,
right.
kind of
Wow.
thing. So
Oh,
it's always fun to hear, kind of.
isn't it? The
Yeah,
char-
yeah. But we've heard from 2. They asked us not to record.
Okay.
So you got some fans out there.
Thank you. Yeah.
Do you have like fond memories looking back at the strike with some individuals?
Well, like with Juan. I mean, Juan was
Oh.
he was really an endearing person, right?
Juan.
And incredibly
And one has since
passionate.
he's since passed, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Actually Juan was great. It was gay, right?
Okay.
And he had some issues with some of the people in LASA studies because of that. He stuck it out. I believe he wound up graduating, and I think he wound up working for San Francisco in some capacity, right? And then I don't know. He wound up being stabbed in his
Oh.
home, and I think it was Fremont,
Wow.
Hayward or Fremont. Yeah.
Like how old was he at the time when that happened?
Oh, 40s or 50s,
Oh,
somewhere like
wow.
that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mhm.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, but
Okay, go ahead. You can step out, just step out. Okay. What would you say is the impact of Juan?
for me, it was just the exposure to so much information and his passion. I mean, his commitment to realizing change
Yeah.
was was pretty remarkable. He
Yeah.
talked about demonstrations in Argentina and about how they would come after them with horses and sabers.
Wow.
And what they would do is they would gather ball bearings, right, and throw them out onto the street,
Wow.
so the horses wouldn't be able to step on them.
Was Juan
Right.
president of LASA? What was Juan's role? Just
He was a member. I don't
Yeah.
even know if we had the officers or so called. I mean,
Okay.
we were so small, right?
But
Like
you
I
got
said,
you got to know him during the strike, though.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
was so committed.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Are there images of him around? Photographs? You think someone has?
Oh, you'd have. I don't know. The only one that might have them would be Meredith.
Oh, okay. We
Yeah,
can.
see,
Okay.
you
Let's.
know what? There's a film archivist, right? That worked for the school.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Forget his name. I think he's English,
Yeah. Okay.
right?
We'll look for him.
And he actually digitized a lot of this film that was taken of the strike.
It's not Steve Zeltzer?
No,
No, but I know you're saying some of there's archival footage, in the library.
right.
So we might be able to find Juan.
You
and
possibly might find him there.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Would you be willing to come again next time as we look at the footage and just say, hey, we'll get a big screen and you'd be like, that is so and so. This.
You know, I am so terrible in recognizing people. I mean, I'd have to tell you, I've got some kind of a phobia or whatever. I don't know how to describe it, but my recall in terms of image, facial image,
And that's okay.
is really, really poor.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But your memory, like when you were describing what was going on campus, like I could see like the way you were talking about the two groups coming together and the faculty coming through with their signs. Like
Oh, that was
the
so
way
good.
you were describing it was you have good memory of it and you're able to articulate
That's
it.
great. Glad
Yeah.
to hear it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, no, it's you left us thinking and reflecting about a lot of things, so that's why I think we need to do a follow-up, because we'll need to convene and say,
Mhm.
well, we need to ask you a little more about this, because you do have a really good memory. Were you good friends with Tomasita then?
Had great relationships with Tomasita and with Donna.
Oh, Donna, that's great.
And Carmen as well.
Oh, that's
you know.
nice.
And yeah.
We'd love to do a collective interview with all four of you. That'd be so fun, kind of.
Yeah.
And you've stayed friends with all of them since.
Okay.
That's one of the things that it's always remarkable.
Yeah.
These are not your keys, are they?
Oh, they are. Where were they?
In the bathroom.
Oh, shoot! Thank you so much.
I just saw Kia on it.
Oh
I was
my
like,
God!
let me
Thank
check.
you.
That's what I
We
was
just saved you from a massive heart attack.
Yeah, I was like, let me check with Grace.
I was in a bathroom break. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Go.
Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know. Thank you, Tiffany. Oh my gosh. I think I was doing too much.
Coincidence.
I don't know how that was. Maybe I realized I could get in there and it was because the door was open and then I forgot the keys.
Oh my gosh, well I'm so glad she knew.
I know,
that
thank
she
God, Tiffany.
felt that it was yours.
Yeah,
Wow,
she's so
yeah,
smart.
exactly.
How did
Tiffany.
she left too?
She has good intuition.
Oh my God, Tiffany's like amazing. Oh my God, yeah,
Yeah.
that's yeah.
I love our team.
Yeah, I know. We love our team. We can get really into these interviews and then forget things all over the place. It is now 2:36, so we can end right now, I think, and give.
Yeah.
Okay, we're
So,
end right now.
camera